Well, I feel like there's something really powerful about the momentum not getting lost, because once you
Yeah.
do, it's like that much harder to start pushing it along. And we were actually at the same preschool as you guys, and I
Yeah.
showed up the next day after giving birth,
Oh my
like the
God,
day
yes!
after. Yeah, remember?
Holy shit, Huntley! And I was like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, you gave birth yesterday.
Today, we're super excited to have on our podcast Valerie Gordon, who is someone I've known about, I don't know, 17, 18 years, I think. She's a well-known chef, chocolatier, entrepreneur. She's also a James Beard-nominated cookbook writer for her amazing and beautiful cookbook called Sweet. She's been a judge on the Food Network and Netflix programs. She MCs Alisal Ranch's barbecue boot camp. She's somebody who I've always admired because she has endless, just boundless energy and a lot of passion towards what she does. And she has a very beautiful aesthetic in everything she does, and clear vision, and a true entrepreneur way that she has executed and built her company basically just completely from scratch, which she'll talk about in this episode, which for anyone starting anything completely fresh from scratch, maybe without funding, there's a lot of really cool tidbits in this episode that will, you know, give a sense of kind of like the grit of what it really takes to start a in her case, very successful business empire now. So I hope you enjoy this episode. So tell us about how you guys got started.
So the backstory is I started baking when I was 8 years old. Although my mother corrected me last week and she was like, "You were 7."
You've been lying this whole time.
I was like, I was? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was a latchkey kid, the youngest of 4. And so there wasn't a lot of oversight over little Valerie. I was kind of left to my own devices. And I found that baking really calmed me down, and it gave me a lot of joy. And so I was home alone after school a lot when I was really young. Like we would, you know, our children would be taken from us in this day and age if we left our kids alone.
Totally.
In the same situation that I had.
Like using the stove and the oven and all the things.
God. Call them now. You know, this person's only 13. They're not allowed to do that.
Right. Oh my God. That's a whole other issue. Yeah.
You know, when we were, you know, young kids, very different deal. Right.
Yeah.
And I lived through it. I'm fine. But I did find that baking was the thing that really, it gave me a project. It occupied me and it made me feel really calm and happy. And then I started bringing cookies to school and gifting them to people. And I found out that people get really happy when you give them cookies.
Yeah.
And so I really liked that exchange that occurred. And my preoccupation with dessert really just continued and grew over the years, where I found going to a bakery or going to a chocolate shop had a very unique and just, it was sort of a singular experience for me. And I found when I walked into a bakery, I would just be enveloped with this sense of anticipation and joy and relief. I just felt like, God, I never want to leave here. This is the happiest place. And I wouldn't even necessarily want to eat everything. I just like to look at it. Yeah. I just like to be close to it and see it all. And I loved it. So anywhere I went, I would want to go to the bakery. And like when I would take the school bus in 5th grade, I would purposely miss the school bus so that I had to take Muni. And
she's from San Francisco as well. We're from the Bay Area.
That just clicked for me.
Muni,
yeah.
Nice. And get off where I could walk by a bakery before going to school and buy pastry.
I think it sort of like comforted you from your latchkey kid. It was like a comfort thing.
My 5th grade mind is like, yes, this will make my day better. Yeah. This is like my goal for the day is to get a croissant and a palmier. That will be everything, right?
So for our San Francisco people, is that bakery still there? What's the name of it?
No, it's not. It was called Tassajara. That
Okay.
was my favorite.
I know
and
that
also,
one. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was so good. And Fantasia was the other one that I went to, which was the inspiration for my pedophores.
Nice.
Or from
oh my God,
a bakery that
good.
I went to when I was like 9 or 10 years old. So that's really where it started. And then throughout my childhood into my teen years, young adulthood, I just kept making more and more things and gifting them to people, particularly during the holidays where it got sort of involved. And Stan and I got together in 2000. And the first time we were hanging out, we were talking about food. And food was the conversation. And that holiday, we decided to do the gifting together. And Stan's really good at graphic design and, other, the logistical stuff. And so we created this little brand called Tall and Small Productions. And he's 6'4" for reference, and I'm almost 5'3". So we did these little logos, and it all had like hang tags and a bunch of different products. And so we did that for like 3 years together, and people were just always like, oh my God, like you really need to, start a company. Like I would pay for this. How do I buy this? And at the time I was managing a restaurant and he was working in a different restaurant.
This was in LA?
And this is in LA.
You guys were in LA by then, yeah.
Yeah. And he never lived in San Francisco, so we met in LA.
Yeah.
I moved here in 1998.
Okay.
And immediately started managing Les Deux Cafés, which was a very big restaurant at the time. I was there from 98 till 2003. And I learned a lot there. It was an amazing place where phenomenal things happened that would never happen today because it was pre-social media and, celebrities could be there and not be photographed and all sorts of activities happen that people probably wouldn't want photographed. And it just, it was a really wonderful, creative space. It was great. Just fun stuff, Dominic. So,
okay. I'll leave it up to my imagination.
Yeah. So the owner, Michelle Lemmy, who's like a fashion icon, and she and her husband, Rick Owens, are now like huge in the fashion world. So they moved back to Paris, and the restaurant closed at the end of 2003. And I was kind of like, what am I going to do? And I thought about it for like a month. And then I realized that we did in fact need to start a company. And it was sort of like, what are we going to start with? And I'd always been I've always been sort of obsessed with specialty foods, and particularly like packaging around specialty foods, also in just the whole experience of it and finding something really bespoke on a shelf and getting excited by it and the look, the feel, what's inside, but really about the whole experience of the product, not just the ingredients of the product or what the actual product is. So a really nice label would excite me. A good ribbon would excite me. You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. Yeah. So one of the products that I'd always made for our gifts was toffee. And it was a thing that I grew up with from C's Candies that I really thought was the unsung hero of the confection and chocolate world, where it had only been presented in a very casual way. So you would see it like in an almond roca or a toffeette or a Heath bar, but you never saw it like in a $50 box. Right? So I was like, I'm going to meld what you see in, a luxurious chocolate shop in Paris with American confection. And I'm going to put these things together and create luxury toffee. And and that's what we did. And I woke up one day, truly, it was February of 2004. And I was like, it's toffee. It's toffee. That's my calling. Yep. And I was like, I'm going to infuse it with different flavors like truffles. And no one had done this yet.
Yep.
And then the packaging came into play because what we did know at the time also is we really wanted to create a brand. We weren't starting a chocolate company, we were starting a brand. Yeah. And we wanted an identifiable brand. So I sort of looped in a lot of interest around design and fashion that I'd always had. And I really wanted the packaging to have a timeless energy to it.
Which it absolutely does.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I have to
great.
say, like, one of our biggest successes, I think, is our packaging has barely changed in 20
I was going to
years.
say, have you ever even had to change it? Because it was so
It's
perfect
been
out the gates.
simplified. So there was more
yeah.
like hand done stuff in the beginning, and now it's less hand done stuff, but it's all still hand touched. So really, there's a lot of inspiration from Chanel, Prada, companies like that I really looked at. And as far as branding that continues, that is timeless and is instantly recognizable, where you look at something and you go, that's Chanel. Like you knew it right away, right? A Chanel number 5 bottle, the classic black and white, that's Chanel. And that was the response that I always wanted from our packaging.
Yep.
So I was testing stuff. And at the time, I was also a part-time yoga instructor. I really loved teaching yoga, and this was sort of like my side hustle. And I had a really interesting array of clientele. There were lawyers, there were a lot of interior designers, producers, like a really interesting mix of people that were all private clients. And I would go to their home and teach them yoga. And I started as I started recipe testing and really figuring out this line of goods, I started bringing people samples. And then one person got really into it. And he was just like, do you want some money?
It's nice to hear that.
Don't mind if I do. Yeah.
Do you want an investor? And he was like, how are you paying for this? And I was like, my savings. And he was like, want some money? And I was like, I really do.
Yeah. Amazing.
So that kind of jump started stuff. And then the other people who were also yoga clients or had been involved with Les Deux Cafés were very helpful in helping establish us with press contacts and, first sales and things like that. And so our very first sale was in July of 2004. So it all happened fast. Yeah. Like from testing, packaging design, first sale, and that our first sale was, and this is, I don't know, if your listeners are more Gen Z or millennial, they might not get this reference, but our first sale was to House and Garden magazine, which was really big then. And we were in the gift guide for House and Garden magazine, but we provided chocolates to a private event at the home of a well-known interior designer at the time. And then our first wholesale account was Dean and DeLuca.
Amazing. Yeah.
so which is gone and probably owes you money, like they owe us money. So the tide has turned.
But it was great back then.
But it was great. It was phenomenal back then.
Yeah.
So our first wholesale sale was Dean and DeLuca. And we built a website at the time that was very much modeled after the spring 2004 Miu Miu campaign. And it was all lifestyle. And we didn't sell anything on our website either, because to do an online store at the time was extremely expensive. Like that software cost like $40,000. It was really expensive at the time. Whereas now it's nothing. It's literally not. Like you can just start a Square store like that and be in business. You're good. No, then it was so expensive. So our website was really about setting a tone for the company. And it was all lifestyle and it was very beautiful. And the only way that you could order from us then was via fax or phone. That was how.
Did you have a dedicated landline for your?
We did. So we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment then in mid-city. And our second bedroom was our company office. And we had a dedicated landline, Valerie Confections, and a fax line, obvi. And our dining room was turned into packaging. So we curtained off our dining room. So that was our packaging area. And I was like tempering chocolate and making toffee in the kitchen. It was like literally, like what I always say is we rubbed two dimes together and started this thing and
Yeah.
went. And
That's
it
It's a
was
really nice story. Yeah.
intense and tireless. And we made so many mistakes. If things that I would redo,
Mm-hmm.
is slow down that launch.
Mm.
Slow down that launch. And this is a very hard thing to say to an entrepreneur because we're crazy. And
Yeah.
what we know about every entrepreneur is that logic and all that bottom line stuff, if you think too much about it, you're not going to launch the company.
Yeah.
And almost everyone I talk to who launches these small companies that actually, by some miracle, stay in business, is we all sort of made the same error. Like you just dive in.
Yeah.
And it's that fearlessness that creates companies.
Yeah.
So, but
slow it down.
would I to go back, I would have analyzed our costs a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
I would have analyzed the cost of our packaging a little differently. We were buying French milled grosgrain ribbon, which was like crazy expensive, but beautiful, beautiful. We now use satin ribbon. We don't use that anymore. But that was how we started. And it just, 20 years in.
So, I mean, what would you say are like, I mean, you say it kind of nonchalantly, but like to start doing the type of approach you took to the toffee, like, do you feel like, what about you was able to make that connection between like kind of the fashion and the way that you envision the company? Like, do you feel like that's kind of your superpower in this? Not everyone has that type of way to kind of see where the trends go, and then how that can like blend really nicely with two different things that aren't really happening at the same time.
I do think that I'm fairly adept at forecasting trends.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I also have that thing where I do what I like. And at the end of the day, I was really listening to my taste and my voice.
Right.
And also, what work would I want to stand behind?
Yeah.
And what also, when you're starting a company, it's like, you've taken so many different roads. You started with ice cream, but I would no longer say that Jessica is an ice cream person.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You've done
Mm-hmm.
so many different things.
Yeah.
And that was really key in my mind. Was I don't just want to do chocolate. I want to do a bunch of stuff. And I also want, like, having a lifestyle element to it was always very important to me. And having something that never looked dated, that always had a perennial quality to it. Mm-hmm. And these were just things that were about the aesthetic that I enjoy and things that I might like to look at. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I really was very true to what I'm attracted to and what people around me were attracted to.
And I think that comes off as like the most authentic presentation mm-hmm. of something too. And that's probably what a lot of people gravitate towards, is that.
Yeah. And I really, throughout the whole company, like anytime I see a big trend happening, I run from it. Mm-hmm. I absolutely run from it, because you can't get overly affected by what other people are doing. Like, you can't get caught in this thing of compare and despair. Oh my God, well, they're making, these, gourmet cupcakes and they're killing it. We should start making cupcakes too. No, just because they're good for them. Like, that's awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Kudos to Candace Nelson forever. You know what I mean? From the get-go, was like, we don't make cupcakes. Yeah. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense for our brand at all. And that's not what sets us apart.
Well, I think also having a brand that seems to be focused on like a timelessness, and like you're mm-hmm. kind of weaving in that like kind of Americana, like luxury Americana take, and just kind of like being consistent with that with a lot of your products that you've made. Mm-hmm. I think it allows you to not be affected by trends, because you're just on your own path and trajectory.
Yeah. And it's all, and which is, a little, it can be scary sometimes, right?
Sure.
But again, at the end of the day, like, in chocolate, about a decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, actually, you would see all of these colored bonbons starting, right? That's when all the spray colors started on bonbons. And they're beautiful. And I know how to do that technique. I appreciate that technique, but I would never sell something like that.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't look like Valerie Confections.
Yeah.
And what I started to see in the chocolate industry in the last decade or so is if you were to line up a bunch of different bonbons with colored treatments, it would be hard to tell the companies apart if you were to take them out of their packaging.
Right.
Whereas our product has never changed in how it looks.
Yeah.
And you put our toffee down and people immediately go, Valerie Confections. And that's the response that I always wanted. And so you really have to like check yourself. You've got to check your integrity. You've got to check, what's the goal here? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So after the toffee, what would you say was your next big hit item? Because I feel like
Pedophores.
I was going to say it's the pedophores, right? I love those.
It was
rose
the
petal
pedophores.
Oh my God. I'm so obsessed.
So the pedophores were born the same year our son was born.
Oh.
So that was in 2007. So, we start going, we're selling toffee. We started making bonbons in like 2006 because people were asking for truffles. And I was like, okay, yeah, truffles totally work in this collection. And then I wanted to start to move towards bakery also. And pedophores to me were the perfect bridge from chocolate to bakery because there's layers of cake in it.
Yep.
And at the time, we didn't have a brick and mortar either. And so everything had to be shipped.
Yeah.
So we were shipping all over the country to different wholesalers and people could, order via fax or phone. So we were shipping all over. So so the pedophores had the same, they really do physically look very similar to the toffee in that they're all squares.
Right.
They're the same proportion. The box is the same size, only with a greater depth.
Yeah.
So it all is very consistent with the brand. And again, with pedophores, I was like, no one's doing pedophores at a very high level. Like what you would see is, pedophores that are frankly more decor or concept where you eat one and you're like, ooh, that's not the most delicious thing. Right. And maybe, very mass produced generally. Right. So I truly, my entire pregnancy with August, I was developing these pedophores and figuring out the coating, figuring out the fillings, figuring out the different flavors that we would do. Yeah. And a lot of them really mirrored the toffee flavors also. So like there's a ginger pedophore, there's ginger toffee. So it really was like this direct translation into bakery, like bakery/confectionery goods. Yeah. And those took off for sure. Yeah. And they're like the most painstaking thing to make.
I was just going to say that they look so difficult to make those.
Yeah.
Like I don't even.
They're easier now, I have to say. Like we streamlined a lot of the process.
Yeah.
But yeah, we make the thinnest layers of cake. It's all stacked, cut. At that time, we were hand dipping every piece of chocolate, every piece of toffee, every pedophore, standing there with dipping forks over these little tempering units.
Yeah, I remember going to your Silver Lake location and seeing the tempering, the chocolate dipping, and
I think there's a video on your website that shows that process too. I was looking at earlier. It was like the most delicious thing I ever ate was the name of the video.
Yes. Yeah. A bunch of food, like in a bunch of Food Network shows covered us in that time frame. And really it was Sonny Anderson of the Food Network put the rose petal pedophores on the best thing I ever ate. That completely changed our company.
Yeah.
It had massive, massive impact. And again, in a way that you wouldn't have now because there's too many shows. There's too many streaming things. This is before streaming. So, and this was like the heyday of the Food Network. And so if you watch The Best Thing I Ever Ate, immediately, like God knows how many millions of people are watching that thing and they're immediately purchasing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that really changed things a lot for us. A lot.
How many voicemails did you have on your phone ordering system? Did it blow
by
up?
that time you could order online. So,
that's good.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I think we installed online ordering in 2009, 2008. I don't remember. Stan would remember that part because that's technology.
Yeah.
But he would remember that. But that makes sense, about 2008, 2009. And then there have been various iterations since, and upgrades and things like that. But yeah, we used to get so many phone orders. But with the best thing I ever ate, it actually crashed our website repeatedly because there were so many orders coming through. It was nuts. It was absolute nuts. So the Pettifors were the next thing. And then I would say the big thing that actually was born right after the Pettifors that really garnered a lot of attention was the Blum's Coffee Crunch Cake. And I resurrected a ton of historic desserts. In 2009, 2008, 2009, 2010, I was really into resurrecting historic desserts that had gone extinct, and I reverse engineered the recipes. But the Blum's Coffee Crunch Cake to this day is our number one selling cake. We ship it all over the country. It's a thing.
Delicious.
And it was something that had gone dormant because the bakery went out of business. And it really pulled on the nostalgia, the sentimentality that people have around dessert in their lives.
Yep.
Yeah.
I might order one right now.
Yeah, he's gonna
I'm just looking it up.
Go on Goldbelly, babe. Go on Goldbelly. We ship to, all over.
It's just so pretty too. They're all just so beautiful and so well orchestrated, and you can't match the flavor. It's all so good. And then you guys got into kind of food, restaurants and bake cafes and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened was, and this is how we met you also. So, we can't skip over the Great Recession because that was really key in the development of our company in a positive way, which is weird. But in 2008, we were really poised for massive growth that year. We had 2 pages in the Williams-Sonoma catalog. We had the cover of the Dean and DeLuca catalog. We were in the Bergdorf Goodman catalog. And again, who cares about catalogs now? But at the time, catalogs were huge.
Yeah.
Getting placement in a catalog was huge. And we front loaded tons of product, all these projections of doing massive numbers, and the economy crashes, right? Holiday 2008 was not a great time. We lost a boatload of money after tirelessly building this thing up for 4 years with a baby now. We're losing so much money. Horrible. So but at that same time, this was really the first experience in our company where it was you got to pivot. You got to figure out the solution. Don't look at the roadblock. Look at the solution, right?
Which
How
I
do you
feel
get
is
around the roadblock?
kind of a pin in what a characteristic a lot of entrepreneurs have, where you're not okay, I'm just gonna fall over and die now because that
you
didn't
don't
work.
get to be a possum.
You're just no, you're okay, what's the actual path now?
Yep.
And that's kind of what separates people.
Yeah, completely. So at that time, it was okay, so a lot of our clientele was and still is in New York, all over the country, but a big customer base of ours in New York. And people real quickly stopped ordering expensive chocolates to be shipped to them.
Sure.
And so I was we need to go local. And what are people still buying? And how do we reach our clientele? And so we decided to go into farmers markets where no matter what, even if, your stock portfolio has fallen apart, you're still going to go get a really nice peach if you're accustomed to a really nice peach. You know what I mean? You're still going to make sure that you've got good food around your table. and you're treating yourself on some level, it's just going to be a modified treat. So I was like, so, people are still going to buy a cookie. They're going to buy a muffin. They're not going to buy $100 box of chocolate. Right. So we really focused on local at that time instead of national. And we got into some really great farmers markets, and we really grew our local customer base that way. And we were at the Hollywood Farmers Market, the Santa Monica Farmers Market, and that is what sustained us and kept us very busy. And at the same time, it really forced me to develop a lot of baked goods. And it started to really sort of shift the identity of the company from this, national chocolate brand to a Los Angeles sweets company.
Did it feel like revisiting your childhood in a sense? Because you started this all with like baking a bunch of things and getting joy from people. So it's almost like a full circle moment in a sense.
Totally. And so we had branding for it called Valerie at the Market. I started making jams as well. And really the idea was we're getting all these different seasonal fruits from our neighbors at the farmers market and putting it into baked goods and jams and selling it. Yeah. So it was it was sort of like a really interesting community support system as well. And we really met so many people in the restaurant industry that way also, because that's where everyone goes. That's where every chef goes. You know what I mean? Right. So our reputation to do not just chocolates, but now was also baked goods really started to grow. And then we started looking so we had this very odd production kitchen in historic Filipino town on a very unlikely street with no parking, not a glamorous street at all. And we needed sort of more substantial brick and mortar. So we were looking, and people were also approaching us. And so we were looking for different places. And then in 2013, we actually signed 2 leases at the same time, which was a little crazy. But again, go back to being an entrepreneur, just repeat those same extreme mistakes over and over. So we opened 2 places the same year because we were, you never know. You make bids on places and sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. Right. Yeah. And we were like, these are both pretty good. And then we got them both and we're like, we're doing it. Let's go. So in opening the Grand Central Market one, and this was sort of interesting because this was the timing of this resurrection of Grand Central Market. Yeah. Where they were bringing in a bunch of new vendors and really recalibrating this historic marketplace in downtown Los Angeles. And we realized we can't just do desserts here. We need to do savory food as well. And so we did this whole savory menu. And then it was the same thing at Echo Park but I did 2 different menus and I actually created all the recipes. So I really started to hone all of my skill sets, Yeah. And the Echo Park menu, really so much of it was based on what I cooked at home. So much of it. And I think that's part of the success of that location is it feels homey. There's just something about it that feels comforting and very, it's easy, it's familiar, it's homey, and Grand Central Market, we did more like a riff on sort of classic diner food, where we would do silver dollar pancakes, we did French toast, we did club sandwiches, we did fried egg sandwiches, we did chef's salad, Chinese chicken salad, all these kinds of things. And so, that's when the savory really took off. Yeah. As well. Yeah.
I remember that era. And I also felt like you were always everywhere. You're so hands-on with your business. I just remember if I happened to walk in Grand Central, you'd be there or wherever, yes. Just of course she's
oh my God,
everywhere.
She's on the line. What's she doing?
With so much energy though. It's amazing.
So where does the book fit into all of this? When did you have time to write that?
I did it. The cookbook came out in 2013 as well. 2013 was a big year. And we had a second child also. At the very end of 2011, we had a second kid. So I was writing and shooting my cookbook as I was nursing a baby. Like I literally was styling photos and nursing a baby.
Yep. Yep. It's not
cakes.
For the faint of heart. Yeah.
It is not for the faint of heart. Like, hon, it was a whole thing.
Did you ever, through in those times, just have any moments where you were like, I just can't, like, I just need a minute, or
yes.
like, I need a week off, or like, did you ever take breaks?
I mean, I have to say, you know, I had sort of a PTSD moment recently about the farmers market days, because those days, you know, I'm very proud of what we did. It was so hard.
So much work.
I mean, and this is how you and I really, like, I think I cruised you
we
at
met
the
at the farmers market. Yeah, you
yeah,
walked
and I was
by
like,
and stopped.
hey,
yeah,
we have the same life. We should
my
know
kid
each other.
was in the stroller behind
I was like, oh my
booth.
God, this is us.
Yeah.
Like our kid would do the same, always in the stroller under the table with
You're
Hot
like,
Wheels.
shh. Yeah.
Couldn't afford childcare at the time. I mean, it was rough. It was not glamorous.
Yeah.
It was not glamorous.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those like I see you moments, and like I get it, I get what's happening here.
Yes,
yeah.
And I think I like grabbed you. I was just like, we need to know each other because
I remember that
we are literally living the same life. I was like, this is nuts. Yeah, amazing. And so there were truly years in there. I would say like 2008 to 2013, we never took days off. We had no days off. Zero.
Right.
Zero. We would go months and months at a time without taking a day off. Mm-hmm. It was awful. Like if I really but you're on this trajectory, you know what I mean? And we were paying ourselves so little at the time as well. Yeah. We were paying ourselves so little. We have no family here. It was just like this state of like growth and struggle. And I do think, you know, this is the thing where some people start a company and they just go, I can't do this. This is too hard.
Well, I feel like there's something really powerful about the momentum not getting lost, because once you do, it's like that much harder to start pushing it along. And I think I told the story to Dominic on our pilot episode about when I had my second child, and we were actually at the same preschool as you guys, and I showed up the next day after giving birth.
Oh my God,
the day after. Yeah, remember?
Holy shit, Huntley. And I was like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And you gave birth yesterday.
Yeah, and I was like, sorry, he wasn't here yesterday. I had a baby, and then they were like, what the f- are you here for? Like, what is happening? But I was in the same zone of like, the momentum can't get lost, so I totally get it. And I was like, it makes perfect sense to me, but everyone was like jaw dropped, like you're psychotic.
Yes.
So yeah.
And again, like it's the wiring of the entrepreneur.
Yes.
Don't give
100%.
up. Keep going.
Yep.
Keep going. And I do think like the thing that motivates you and keeps you going is the work that you had already done. But also like if you see traction happening in your company, even if you're not making much money, you're like, but I can still see it.
Yeah.
I can still see it. I can see the trajectory of this. I can see where this is going. And if you see like your sales going up, even though you're like breastfeeding and doing this and doing that, you're still like, how do we walk away from this? Right. We're not there yet. You know what I mean? But there were many times where it was just like, this is awful. This is awful. And I would say within our relationship, and those were the hardest years for sure.
I bet. Yeah.
For sure. Where, you know, there's just no freedom. You're completely tied to these very young children and this young business and trying to do it all. Did you guys have
much family around?
None.
Yeah.
Zero.
It's the same. Yeah. That's hard.
Zero. It's really so hard. So hard. So, you know, we really, you know, I'm forever grateful to the community of parents that we fell into in preschool. Like families that we met at Huntley, we are still very close to these people. And there were so many people who like would pick up our kids, you know, and keep them during the holiday season until we could get back home. You know, it's like without that kind of community support, I don't think we would be where we are today. So it's not
you might
just
not be married
about
today.
Yeah, we might not be. Like, there were definitely some very challenging times.
Yeah.
And they are in the best of situation.
Sure.
Couples who own a company, who have young kids with 2 nannies have struggle. It's hard. It's really hard to raise a family and to grow a career at the same time. It's not easy.
For sure.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your stuff that you've done on TV. Because I remember Zoe was watching, which one on Netflix?
Oh, Nailed It.
Nailed It. And she's watching one day, and I was like, oh, there's Valerie. And so, how was that? Do you still do stuff like that currently, or are you?
I do a lot of media stuff. My degree's actually in drama.
I remember you're an actress, yeah. And Stan, right? You guys both came to LA for Hollywood. Yeah,
exactly.
I love it.
So I've always been very comfortable with cameras and TV work, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it a lot. So I've done a lot of TV. I do a lot of more stuff in the digital space now. But it's something I'm always doing whenever it comes up. I've been on, a lot of shows on the Food Network, on Netflix, and now I feel like a lot of content is just moving more digital, where you're doing, tasting, judging, cooking with different brands and on different platforms. But that's something that I'm always open to and really I love doing.
Yeah.
You have a Substack, and I actually subscribed to the public part of it because I was curious. And I was just part of that. I think it connects to this idea you're saying you have this lifestyle brand. So you're really showing up for your community in a lot of ways. I noticed that you call people, it's like called Hi Gang. It's like, this is your gang. This is like your crew and your family. And so I think that's a really beautiful story there.
Thank you. I would say in the last 5 years, a really big focus of mine has been drawing attention to causes that I really believe in, but also to other companies. I try to help startup companies as much as I can. And say there's a young company, I will, if they send me a sample of something, I'll absolutely post it in Instagram, tag them, I'll purchase it and sell it in our Echo Park marketplace. I'll be available to them for questions, for references about different things or different struggles that they might be having. But I would say at this point, that's really a huge focus for my career outside of the company, is to do more expression of lifestyle, of recipe content, of just stuff that I'm into, that I'd like to share with people.
Yeah.
And that's a growing thing for sure. Hi Gang I launched in January of 2023. And everyone should subscribe who's listening. I'm the only Valerie Gordon on Substack. And there's a lot of each month, it's sort of I've always loved magazines and what magazines do and sort of the variety of content in a magazine. So I'm trying to create my own digital magazine. So there's always right now, there's always what's in season and recipes of things that are in season. There's a sustainable suggestion. Sustainability is something that I'm trying to be much more aware of and focused on. There's always travel stuff. There's different restaurants. There's interviews with different makers. It's just sort of an ongoing thing that I really love doing it. I have to say, I really derive a lot of satisfaction over writing this newsletter. It's fun.
That's fun. So where do you see things? Do you have a vision for the next 5-10 years? Do you see where the path, we were talking about, if you can share, if you want to share?
We relocated our main facility and we built out this compound in Glendale in 2022. It's a 5,000 square foot compound where we have a retail area, a significantly larger shipping area. We also have a little garden where we serve afternoon tea and some office and event space. So, things have changed since our apartment, thank God, yeah. 20 years ago. So where we're really focused right now is increasing our distribution of wholesale products around the country, expanding our collection. We just started shipping internationally and growing that as well. I do finally feel ready to write another book, which feels very exciting.
Nice.
So I'm putting together a proposal for a book. It was 10 years ago that my last book came out. It was a James Beard finalist. It did very well. Yep. And now I'm ready to do another one,
Amazing.
So
you
I
heard
would
it
say,
here first, everybody.
There we go.
Upcoming
there we
book.
go. More media projects, more events, and more community stuff. That's where I think it's all really going. I love the interconnectivity of different people, different brands, and playing with all of that. And this year we're celebrating. We've got a lot of 20th anniversary stuff coming out. We're officially 20 in July. We're launching merch this year, which we've never done. Really, we're doing a whole collection of merch. We have some really interesting collabs coming out. So it just, it doesn't stop. And it's a thing about creating a brand where, as long as it's consistent with the messaging, with the look, with the feel, we can keep growing it, right? Yeah. So that's where it's going.
I love it. That's exciting and inspiring.
I know we're right at 3 year time, six my time. But if any last words, Valerie, or I know you said you support a lot of causes. Any of those causes you want to give a shout out to, or any way you want to close the conversation?
I would say right now, what's really, there's a lot of independent restaurants and independent food companies that are really struggling. It is not an easy time to own a food business with cost escalation, with labor cost escalation. All of it is really, really challenging, particularly in the great state of California. And
what about Ozempic, for instance, in that as well, right? Like food sales are down.
We won't get into that. that's a different podcast, honey. But I would say, please continue to support the independent business owner, because what we don't want is for it to be a landscape completely made of chains. And you get the interesting stories and you get the heartfelt made goods when you support the independent business owner. So please keep doing that. And, my God, I'm sure you all want to know how to get Valerie Confections products and visit us.
Absolutely.
So thank God you can now order from us online.
It's amazing.
We don't have a fax anymore. Wild. So you can go to valerieconfections.com for that. If you're in Los Angeles, pop by Valerie Echo Park or Valerie Glendale. Follow me on Substack and at Valerie Confections on Instagram.
Amazing. I'm going to come out to Glendale for tea. I'll bring Zoe.
Please. Yay.
Yes. I know you'll be there
because
fun. You're everywhere. So
because she's everywhere.
she's always right there.
Congratulations on the podcast.
Thank you. It's fun. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story with us. It was fascinating and awesome, and I loved hearing it and getting reminded of some parts. So thank you.
Oh my God. Jessica. Tandem paths, lady. Keep it going.
Here we are.
Keep
still
it going.
Yeah.
Carmela for life. Totally.
Well, tell
Get
Stan hello.
Girl.
Yeah.
I will. I always love the burnt brown sugar one.
Oh yeah.
What's that one called?
The brown sugar vanilla bean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my jam. Yeah.